Ya estamos fuera de tiempo, pero me parece un desperdicio que trajimos al doctor desde Italia y no poderle hacer algunas preguntitas. Entonces, si el doctor está de acuerdo, me gustaría abrir el espacio para una o dos preguntas para que el doctor las pueda contestar. Entonces, por favor, levante la mano. Por ahí está Marcela y por ahí su nombre. Arturo, por favor. Listo.
Okay, por acá. Okay. Thank you. My name is Froilán Hernández. I study here the PhD in Public Policy and Development. My English is not very well, so I'm going to try to do my best. Well, taking like a start point what you say, I understand that there is always a minimum level of corruption. So my question is if there are experiences in cities or countries with level 0 in corruption, or which is the evidence about the achieve of low levels in corruption. I think that because I think that matters because with this information we will have metrics to fit goals, credible goals about which level of freedom of corruption we could to achieve. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Marcela Aguilar. I studied a PhD in social science, and I think some comments and a lot of questions, but maybe the studies and the experience around the world show that the corruption has many phases and is a complex phenomenon and adapts and improves in different contexts and environments. So one lesson is that we cannot use only approach or paradigm from to analyze, but it's better rather in this transdisciplinary approach. And so what do you think of the studies of cognitive science and the psychological, and how could this approach dialogue with the sociological culture approach between in the different levels in the study of corruptions, because the tools provided by each of these approach could be considered opposed. For example, the distinction, the social fact versus behavior, how can dialogue this approach, sociological, with the psychological approach, and in the context of autocratizations and backsliding, what should we observe in the study of corruption, because the power imbalance are accentuated in the autocratic environment. It's about backsliding.
Okay. Well, I saw that other have like to put questions, so I'm ready later to answer in a different setting. But I will answer now to the two public questions, very interesting. The first one, if there is experience in our to our knowledge of context with a zero level of corruption. Obviously, I would say that I would problematize this kind of question, because obviously if you descend into the micro level, for instance, an office, a specific office, probably you can find cases in which there is, the rules of integrity prevails, and nobody dares to ask or to propose a bribe, and there is, no expectation that anybody will ask for an undue favor or something like that. There are, for sure, experiences like that even in Mexico, in every country, a specific context where the rules of integrity prevails. And I think that's a very encouraging point of starting point, because from that experiences we can learn a lot on what enforce in certain circles of recognition the value of integrity. But as soon as you try to expand this kind of experience into a larger context, obviously the incentives, the opportunities, the temptations of corruption enter into play. And so probably somebody will try to gain undue advantage from his office, from his power. And that's normal, that's human, I would say. But there is another problem to problematize, so to say. We are talking about corruption as if we were all sharing the same idea, concept, and definition of what corruption is. We have one definition which is provided to us by the criminal law, the criminal code. But we know that it's very defective, partial, and biased somehow. We know that corruption is something else. Many forms of corruption are not criminalized at all, but we recognize, we denounce them as corruption. State capture, legalized corruption, institutional corruption, and something like that. So we should start to think at corruption two different levels, even when there is no corruption at all, so to say, because the law, the criminal law, is harmless to prosecute corruption. There can always, and sometimes there must be, the power for somebody to denounce, so to politicize certain conduct, certain conducts, defining them as corrupt, because we recognize that those kind of behavior does not fulfill a general interest. So corruption is a politically contested concept, so to say. It's not an objective definition that we all are able to apply. So this makes it even more difficult to answer to your question, because even officially there is no corruption, because nobody can be prosecuted for corruption crimes. We can still recognize and denounce on another level of political responsibility and accountability, or a social accountability, whatever you like, that according to our judgment, yes, that's corruption. That's a betrayal of the public trust for private interest, so to say. Second question. Well, I am a practicant of the contamination of different perspectives. So I completely endorse the approach which try to often to let different disciplinary approaches to corruption to dialogue. Quite often they use different words to try to describe the same phenomenon, the same object of analysis. So just to translate from one discipline to another can be very useful. And I agree with you, the psychological approach, but the ethnographic approach, anthropological approach, they all have to come together and to dialogue. I'm not an expert, so I cannot say how the psychological, but I can imagine that, going more into detail in what are the psychological mechanisms that allow certain people to be more or less resilient or prone to corruption can be very useful in order to, combine this different individual perspective into the social outcome of a high level of corruption or a low level of corruption. The final point, the backslide of democracies into autocracy, that's an example of a politicization of the concept of corruption. All over the world, in Italy as well, there's plenty of populist politicians who use the issue of corruption in order to target others to get into power. having, so to say, a quite, easy approach to what democracy is, to what the constraints and the accountability mechanism of corruption, of democracy really mean. So I agree that this is a very big issue. Okay. Thank you.
Hola, hola, ya. Traducción abreviada, pero estamos sobre el tiempo. Básicamente, lo que dice que efectivamente la corrupción tiene muchas caras y es un fenómeno complejo que tiene que ver con contextos. No se puede usar un solo paradigma o un acercamiento, pero sí se requiere un marco de referencia para poder llegar a ello. Desde la ciencia cognitiva, o sea, desde distintas aproximaciones, sí, sin duda, son complementarias. Sería muy interesante conocer, por ejemplo, las motivaciones psicológicas de alguien y a partir de ahí tener información y que se puedan mezclar estas aproximaciones. Ahora, él promueve el acercamiento pluridisciplinario y sin duda eso nos dará mayores respuestas. Ahora, en cuanto al retroceso democrático, hay muchos ejemplos de la politización del combate a la corrupción. En Italia ha habido políticos, y creo que en todos lados, que utilizan la corrupción para ganar elecciones sin fortalecer la rendición de cuentas y otros elementos fundamentales.
Grazie mille, professore Vannucci, per quello che ci hai insegnato. È stato un piacere averti con noi. Per favore, retorna presto. Ciao. Muchas gracias a todos.